Alright, so, just to remind you guys, we are doing this lesson. Tomorrow we'll have a little bit of a quiz over these two lessons that we've done so far.
No review?
And then, well, we might do a little bit. It won't be too bad though. It won't be very long. And then we'll start a new chapter. After that chapter, we will start getting ready for Smart Balance. So, it's coming up. It's going to be a pain. I know that. Don't complain because
What kind of pain?
I complain about it.
The window pane? No, I'm just kidding.
What?
When a
You
student
can't make it into the
You
actual
know, the
game,
pane of
so.
the window, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
Anyway.
when you
He
get
knows
on a
what's up.
scooter.
Alright, so today
Oh.
we are going to be looking at inverses. So make sure you guys are taking notes. Take your headphones out, please. Put an email to somebody. Nerd. Alright.
I unplugged my beeps.
Two equations is exactly the same as the first. What?
They're crusty.
They're crusty, but they work perfectly.
Alright.
Except y.
So inverses
So it's-
are two equations where the second is exactly the same as the first, except the x and y values are switched around. So this is a relation S right here, and we're going to make its inverse really quick. And the way we write inverse is we have an exponent of -1. That means inverse. And we read it as S inverse. So if it's ever a -1 exponent like that, that's how we know it is the inverse. So it is special because the x and y is flipped around. So it's pretty simple. Instead of 0, -1, it's going to be -1, 0. Instead of 2, 0, it's going to be 0, 2.
What?
Instead of 3, 2, it's going to be 2, 3.
And
And
3, 4.
3, 4. Pretty easy.
What? What is that?
Flip it around. That's the pattern.
Why did you skip one?
What?
What?
I don't know. That's
Oh,
just a
no.
book example.
Oh, no, I wasn't even looking. Austin's head was blocking it. I just read, you know what I'm doing.
There you go. So, these are inverses of each other because when you flip the x and y around, you get to the other one. So they are actually both inverses of each other, but since we started with S, we say this is S inverse over here on the right. Alright, we are also going to be looking at some graphs. And we're going to graph some inverses.
Can you pass high school?
No.
You have to do it again.
Come on, man.
I don't want to graph
Okay.
Shut up.
So, we are going to graph the inverse of each one of these points. And it's pretty simple. I just need to find the x and the y and flip it around. This point is at 0, -1, right?
Yeah.
So the inverse is going to be at -1, 0.
Oh, negative.
This one is at 2, 0, which means the inverse is at 0, 2. This one right here is at 1, 2, 3, 2,
That was really slow.
which means it's going to be at 2, 1, 2, 3.
I think at that point they would declare you dead.
This last one up here is at 1, 2, 3, 4,
Pull
1,
the
2,
plug,
3,
Jesus.
which means my inverse is going to be at 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Didn't we do this
And
last year? Or the year
What's
before?
special about inverses?
You can count.
It's like you just yep, and you flip,
Over the line of symmetry.
Yeah.
which is y equals x.
Oh.
Why are you here? Where did you come from? I have 2 of these boxes.
I was talking to somebody new.
Yeah.
Why are you
Yeah.
here?
You are, Jay. Alright, anyway, I was just confused.
Oh
Anyway.
yeah.
So, our inverses are reflected over the line y equals x. And we're not really going to get too far into this, but what inverses do, when you put them together, they kind of cancel each other out, and you end up on this line somewhere. So if you put these two
That's my drawing.
together,
That's my-
you end up on this line. You put these two together, you end up on this line. These two on this line. These two on this line. And it's, we're not going to do a lot with inverses, but we're going to do a little bit. Alright, first in-class problem, I want you to find the inverse of these graphed points. Find the inverse and graph them. And maybe we'll have some people graph them on the board once we're done.
Wait, Hold up a minute.
Wait,
I'm
so
confused.
does it matter?
So,
Okay, let's.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which way you go. You always do the opposite. All right. So for example, this one right here is at -2, 0,
so
which
it's gonna be at
means
2, 0.
we're gonna go 0, -2.
0, 9. Oh my god. I'm so stupid.
So you always just do the opposite.
Wait, where'd you
Flip
go?
or
Okay, so this one's at
is at
1.
-2, 0, which means my inverse is
So
at
it's
0.
gonna be at -3, 1.
4.
So wait, would this one right here be
Right, Goki?
That one right there is going to be at
Do that again.
1.
So this one's at 1, -3, so it's gonna be at
Flip the x and the y. around.
would that be it's like
I forgot which ones I did.
This one has no cuts, right in the middle.
Wait,
So you're gonna go -3, 1.
So it's gonna be at
oh,
Because you're not reversing negatives, you're just flipping x and y around.
okay. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about working.
No, I mean, if it helps you visualize,
So-
the light on.
Alright.
Where'd that one go?
You're gonna move.
Oh, okay.
Then there's
Like
4,
right
4.
there.
Oh, up and
Doesn't it go -4, -4?
Like on that.
Goki.
You just
What?
Just 4, 4.
Just stays 4,
Then
4.
move.
Oh, I thought it would go negative.
Go get it. I did this right. Oh well.
Yeah. So remember, you're not flipping negatives and to positives or positives and
Where did
negatives.
that blue dot come
You're
from?
gonna flip around the x and the y. This one right here.
Okay, yeah. This one. So then what? You go down 2, right 2, left 2? Oh my god.
Okay, hold on a second.
I'm so confused. I don't.
Okay. What's the xy coordinate?
I mean, I'm not confusing.
You are a little confusing, so that's okay.
No, Gopi, hush. What is it? This one is
Shack over
1, 2, red 1. 2, 1. So it's gonna be 1, 2. Right?
It's still 4, 4,
right?
Slow down. Slow down. Oh man.
part that's confusing me is like.
Alright, let's do
So it's
let's do
two-
another one.
It's 2, 1.
Okay.
So it's gonna be 1, 2.
No, it's already 1, 2.
2, 1.
Oh, then 2.
2. So it's going to be
2, 1.
2, 1.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, wait for me too.
Oh god.
I'm gonna go home and.
Yeah, I did it right this time. Do you have to draw a line?
This one is 0.
1, -3.
Well,
0, 4. So it's gonna be 2,
got it.
4. And then
No, you don't have
next
to.
one 0. There's gonna be 0, 4.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna go to June.
Okay, I just need to write these points down, then do it.
Yeah, that's another way. If it helps, you can write the actual xy coordinates down and flip them around. Like this one was at -2, 0. It means you flip them around and you
What
get,
if it's just 4, 4?
that looks like a smiley face. 0, -2.
Yeah, then you just leave
The
it.
monocle.
Yeah.
Ah,
Can we just do this already?
It was like
We
a
are doing
mustache.
Right now.
Let's see, 4, 0.
1, 2, 3,
Okay, I have a dot there. I have a dot there.
1, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think I did this right.
Actually,
Yep, I knew it.
Wait, why is that dot there? Where did that one go?
This one?
Oh,
I'm gonna beat these guys.
-1, 4, 4, -1, and that dot's on the same spot.
Switch the X and Y.
All right, double check your dots with mine. See if you got them.
I had them right.
down, down, down. This one.
Why is there so much on the back?
Because it's fun. I don't know.
Okay, there we go. Now I have it.
Teacher, you made the lesson.
Are you on time?
I'm out of water.
Thanks for telling me.
I forgot where I was for a second.
I'm gonna be a teacher.
All right, double check your dots with mine.
Just
I'll
like
give you 30
torture my
seconds or so,
students.
and we'll keep going over it.
This is the shit I had to do.
Freeze and break it.
All right, this is just kind of the intro part for inverses. This is the fun part. So the fun part for inverses. So we're gonna find some actual inverse equations. So we're gonna find the inverse of y equals x squared minus 1. So to find the inverse, when we did it before, we flipped around x and y, right?
Yep.
So we're gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna change x's to y's, y's to x's, and then I'm gonna solve it for y.
Too much.
So I'm going to go x equals y squared minus 1. We're going to solve it for y.
Okay.
Okay, so if I'm going to solve this for y, Alyssa, what's the first thing I should do?
I don't know. Oh no. I'm stressed.
Calm down.
I can't.
Alright, I'm solving it for y. Do I need to get rid of the squared or the minus 1?
Both?
Minus 1.
Next one.
Yeah, and how am I going to get rid of it?
Plus.
We're going to plus 1 on both sides.
Oh.
I love
We have
it.
x plus 1 equals y squared.
A squared,
Yes.
right?
Maya, how am I going to get rid of the squared?
I don't know. Squared?
What?
Squared?
Squared.
The
Yeah, square root it.
square
We're gonna
root.
square root it.
Squared.
Alright, so I'm gonna have square root
Square
of x plus 1, right? And it's gonna equal y. And then the only real difference is, because this is an inverse, in order to show that this is the inverse of the original, I'm gonna put negative 1 right there. To show that this is y inverse.
Y inverse.
What's the point
Y
of
inverse. Y inverse. Y
Shut
inverse.
Is that a question, or?
Brian.
that? Yeah.
God.
No, shut the back door.
Ooh,
Uh,
look at this guy.
No, we could start smarter balance early. So
You shut the back door.
maybe that is what quiet.
Dude, we should do it. I don't have to. Start it right now.
what is that?
A frog.
Remember?
That's a
You.
frog.
I love you.
That's a frog.
That looks like a frog.
I don't see a frog.
You don't look like
Oh, I
a frog.
kind of see it.
Supposed to be-
That looks like a weird
Really?
rat.
Yeah.
That's cute, though. It looks like a-
Alright, we're gonna do another one real quick, and then you guys are gonna try one. We're gonna find the inverse of y equals 2x plus 8. So we're gonna flip our x and y around just like before. X equals 2y plus 8, and then we just gotta solve it for y.
X
Raven, what's the first thing we should do?
Minus 8.
Yep. We're gonna minus 8 on both sides. I'm gonna go x minus 8
How do you
equals
access
2y. What should I do next,
And
Chris?
divide it.
There's 2 on?
Yep, we're gonna divide it all by 2. I think
There's
it's
no
that.
Y.
So,
Right there, you switch the X and the Y.
okay, so we are dividing by 2, right? We have to be careful. When I divide by 2, I'm dividing everything by 2 on the right, which means I have to divide everything by 2 on the left. So I'm going to have x minus 8, everything divided by 2, and it's going to equal y. But because this is an inverse, I'm going to show it's an inverse by going negative 1.
Oh, it's divided by 2, not 8. Oh, no.
You know the king of hell when we keep saying yep.
What is it for
Yeah,
motherfucker?
even the year.
Alright, first in class problem. I want you to find the inverse of this
That's
one.
asking a
Plus
lot.
2 or divide 2?
But I think you can do it.
So it's gonna be
That's
X
a 3.
equals Y minus 2 over 3.
Yep. And then solve it for y.
You times the 3. No, you don't. I don't know what to do.
Oh, minus 1, my bad.
Minus all.
Can you times by 3 on the right side?
I actually
Cancel out and have 1 minus 2.
Okay, I need help. I got step right. I just stepped.
Did I do it right then?
No, you didn't, man. Quiet.
James, I'll hit you. Did I do it?
She will.
Oh, wait.
What do I do after that?
You're solving, right?
Of course, suddenly.
So this one's a little weird. Because everything's being divided by 3, do the opposite of that first.
So times we didn't make? How?
Times 3 times 3.
Like this?
Why?
No, you're timing down here and they cancel.
So let's just cancel it out.
SMH, check my head.
You still have minus 2 though. You have y minus 2 on top. The bottom cancels out.
Oh, so this is over here now?
Yeah.
So we have 3 minus x
I
plus
mean,
3
what?
plus x
3 times.
I use my sister.
equal negative 2.
Equals y minus 2. And you're still going to solve it for y by getting rid of the minus 2. You okay, Alyssa?
No, go get it.
I feel like you're having a heart attack.
So,
You got a weird expression when you keep going like this.
I did that once, okay.
Alright. So, let's go over this one together in case you're not quite sure. We gotta flip x and y around, right? We're gonna go x equals y minus 2 divided by 3. Alright, the first thing we need to do, because everything is being divided by 3, the first thing I need to do is times 3 on both sides.
I said that, but I didn't do it.
When I times by 3 on both sides, I get 3x equals y minus 2. And then, Kayla, what do I need to do after that?
Don't you want to?
Put those sunflower seeds away.
Divide by 2.
Oh yeah, and then why did Devin just huddle back going this?
Divide by 3.
Oh, cheek full right now.
Alright, what am I doing, Kayla?
You got 2.
Add 2 to both sides.
Yeah.
Cheek full.
I thought that was your tongue first.
Oh dear, that's 2.
Mm. But we're not quite done. Helena, what do I need to remember to put by the y?
-1,
Yeah.
which I did not remember.
Oh, have you
Which I
ever
did
made
that
one?
too.
And I-
No, I don't need to.
I did
Alright.
y'all.
So 3x plus 2 equals y inverse.
Why?
Or inverse y. Kind of the same thing.
This is the first time I've seen you wear it.
Yeah, we feel lost in this stuff.
They've been in my suitcase.
Yeah. It's all dirty because you wore Mike and did you?
Yeah.
I can't actually say that. But me and my roommate, we'll say stuff like that to each other all the time. I know, it's just warms
Alright.
my heart.
We are going to look at one last thing with inverses. So, inverses are also a little special. So, if I do a composition, which is what we did yesterday and for our warm-up, if we have inverses, they are kind of special. When I do an inverse, I will end up with whatever I plugged into the original thing. So, let me give you another example. Okay, if I do an inverse thing, where I do, let's say I have f for my first one, and I'll write it the way I like to write it, and then f inverse of 3, like this, our composition of functions. Inverses basically just cancel each other out, and I'm left back over with 3. So inverses cancel out whatever we get, and we end up back where we started. I started with 3, I'm going to end with 3 whenever I work with inverses. So on this one right here, if I'm going to do f and then f inverse of 2, I am going to end up with 2, but we're going to go through all the work just to show it. So we will end up with each other. We're back where we started. So I started with 2, I'm going to end with 2, but we're going to go through it just to be safe.
Okay.
So we're going to start with f inverse of 2, right?
Yeah.
So f inverse is right here. So f inverse of 2. And we're going to go 2 minus 8 divided by 2. And 2 minus 8 is negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Right?
Wait. I totally just lost you.
So we are plugging in 2 and for f inverse right here.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Remember,
We're doing the, I was doing,
Yeah.
looking at the other one.
f of x and y, remember, they're basically the same. We treat them the same way. They're not exactly the same, but we treat them the same way. So, this reads f inverse just like we had a y inverse. Okay, I got 3 out of it. Or did I get, no, I got negative 3, excuse me. I got negative 3 out of this. So I'm going to plug a negative 3 back into my original f of x. So f of negative 3, which is going to equal negative 3 times 2. Oh, I did that backwards, but that's fine. Plus 8. Negative, let's see, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Plus 8 is 2. I ended where I started, which is kind of what inverses do. They just bring you back to wherever you were, wherever you started. I started with 2. I went through a function, and then its inverse, and then I ended back up at 2.
Is there ever gonna be a time where it's not gonna be what it starts with?
Yes, actually. So, I don't think we're going to get into any of these now, but there are some times where this doesn't work, which is why I put usually right here. Some things don't have an inverse. Some things you can't inverse them, because if you try to inverse them, it's like you divide by 0, for example, and you can't divide by 0. let me give you a, let me think. Okay, what if I had y equals x, and then the inverse of that is, actually no, let's go y equals, I'm trying to do this in my head. Y equals 1 over x and y equals x, right? Those are inverses. You flip x and y around. No, sorry, I'm trying to think of one time the inverse off the top of my head. Alright, and we'll just pretend. So, for example, what if you had y equals 1 over x, and let's say you plug in 0. Can you plug in a 0 on this? No. You get a undefined if you can't divide by 0. So this one actually doesn't have an inverse at 0. So it doesn't work. So I don't think you run into any of those, but keep in mind you might occasionally get an undefined. So keep that in mind. But I don't think we'll get to those. If we ever decide to do like a pre-calc, then you'll see those. But not right now. Alright. So we are going to go through and we're going to double check some of these. So to start with, we are going to find the inverse of this first problem up here, 1 over x minus 1. We're going to find that inverse. And then we're going to plug in, actually this might be the usual part. We're going to find what the inverse is, and then we're going to do composition of functions with our inverses and see what we get. So to start with though, because this is an f of x, those are kind of weird to work with. So instead of f of x, we're going to write y in order to just help solve it. So I'm going to go y equals 1 over x minus 1, and I'm going to find the inverse just like we talked about. I'm going to flip my x and y around, and I'm going to go x equals 1 over y minus 1. And we're going to go through and we are going to solve it for y. This one's a little weird though. What do you think I should do first?
Multiply y.
Oh, that's one.
No, it's times by 1.
So Devin had it. So I'll give you guys a little bit of a shortcut. Everything over here is divided by y minus 1, right? Which means I need to times by y minus 1. But when I times by y minus 1 on both sides, it's like I'm going to put it in parentheses and then times it. Times by y minus 1, times by y minus 1, like that. I get x, y minus 1 equals 1. What do I have to do to solve it for y next?
Distribute.
Well, we could distribute, but how about we just divide by x?
Oh, yeah.
We'd have to divide by x, right?
Yeah.
And I get y minus 1 equals 1 over x. What happened to go from this one in the purple, go to this one in the green right here? Basically, what did I just do?
You just flipped it.
You just flipped. So, whenever you're dividing by what you're solving for, like I have y minus 1 right here,
Yeah.
I'm dividing by it. Flip these around. That's a shortcut, flip them around.
Alright.
Okay, keep that in mind, you'll have one to do like this. We are not quite done. James, what's my last step to solve for y?
Plus me do it?
We already did that. Yeah, we already did that.
Plus 1?
Plus 1. We're going to plus 1 to both sides. And I'm going to just write my final answer over here so I can look at it on part B and part C. I have y, and I'm going to go y inverse, going to equal 1 over x plus 1. So my original is 1 over x minus 1, and my inverse is y inverse, which actually, yeah, it's fine. So technically I should flip this back to be f inverse x, but I'm not going to worry about it. They're going to work basically the same way. Alright. So whenever, I'm going to do part B, f of f inverse of 1, but even though it says f inverse, we're going to use this one first. So this is what we did in our warm-up, what we did yesterday. We're going to plug it in and just make sure that we get 1 out of it, because this should equal 1, right? Because they're inverses, and they lead you right back to where you started. So I'm going to plug in 1 in my inverse here. and we'll see what we get. So I'm going to do 1 over 1 plus 1, which is 1 over 1 is 1, plus 1 is 2, right? I'm going to take this 2, plug it into my original function, and I'm going to have 1 over 2 minus 1, which is 1 over 1, which is 1. Yay, we did it 1.
Do we have to do work on that?
Right now, yeah.
Dang, that's whack.
Actually, yes, you have to do it. Alright, let's do part C.
Well,
So Dazen, if I'm going to start on part C, what am I going to start off doing?
Putting 1 into that,
Into my original, right?
yeah.
So I'm going to have 1 over 1 minus 1. What am I getting my denominator here, Austin?
0.
Can I divide by 0?
No.
No.
So on this one, it doesn't exist. So I'm going to go in
Wow.
S for no solution. So usually
Smooth.
your inverses lead you back to where you started. This is one of those special ones where it didn't happen. So sometimes they're like this, not always. Because I can't divide by 0, so it doesn't exist. When I try to do this composition, I can't do it. There's no solution. So you do need to show the work, but keep in mind, you're either going to get the exact same thing as where you started, or it's going to be no solution. So it'll be one or the other. Alright. Everybody got this down? Yep. Alright. That's it. So, what I want you to do for your exit ticket, you're going to do two things. You're going to start by finding the inverse of 3x minus 9. Remember, just change f of x to y. It works basically the same thing. And then you're going to calculate f of f inverse of 3.
Oh, wait.
And remember, this is the exact same way as writing our composition of functions as before.
Damn.
Wait, so Gorby,
Yes.
I have a question. You're gonna what pass? So the x equals 3x minus 9 of the x equals 1
Yeah.
3x and y.
Where's the -1 at?
Oh,
Where's the negative?
Alright, so start by finding the, it's on the board.
So,
You start by finding the inverse and then plug in 3 in that composition.
so
We have to
for
find the inverse?
You switch from
So,
fx to
Right from
y.
it.
Yeah.
where does that?
You could do, like, flip the x and the fx
I
around.
think I did it right.
X
We
equals
just call
3.
And then we plug in
y
3.
minus 9.
it. Alright.
Then you solve
So
it, right?
change f of x,
Yeah.
change it to a y.
Do you plug in
Because
3
f
then?
of x is weird.
No, I think you
Oh,
solve it.
okay, okay.
You solve
And then
it. You
flip
solve
your x
it.
and y around.
Again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can. Add 9.
Oh, no, I already solved it. Look.
5 equals 9.
Oh, you're gonna need to do
Yeah.
I don't even know what the
One,
price
one.
is.
And then you plug that 3 back in.
Yeah.
So
6 or no,
this,
it's 10.
this x
12.
and y around.
Is that 12 or
So
11?
make that
So
x equals 3y.
3 is 4.
minus 9.
94 times 3 is 12. 12 minus 3.
Alright, oh, and let me turn on Scrad real quick, and I'll keep
12 divided by 3.
and I'll put your homework on
And the answer is 4.
Yeah, and then you
The
plug
thing
it
too.
back in.
You plug it back in again.
Yeah.
Give me 1 minute here.
So 4 plus 9.
Did I do this right, Goldie?
Hang on, let me
Oh, yeah.
ticket.
Hold up.
Hold up, yo.
What?
We could have just said it was 3 because look, it's one of these.
Yeah, we have to show our work.
Yeah, but still, it's 3.
So how do we plug it in?
What do you mean?
How do we plug in our answers? Just get rid of your answer.
Into,
Soccer tip.
oh, you'll just type in your inverse. Just, it doesn't have to be formatted right. I'm gonna look through it manually. I'm gonna look through it on my own.
So we have a quiz tomorrow?
Yes.
Tomorrow review in the beginning?
Yeah. Not a quiz.
What? Oh, what
So you
the?
don't know. got this when you flip it.
I already got all that.
I accidentally did a slash and then hit enter. I'm like, too gaudy slash enter.
Okay, let me write it.
Whatever. It's close enough.
Alright, I'll go around and help people here in just a minute. Let me finish putting homework on Google Classroom. I should probably stop recording too.